Okay. So hello again. Welcome to a P2 session after a while. I know yesterday we were supposed to have it, but we ended up discussing yesterday's paper. Hopefully, all of you or most of you attended it. If you haven't, you'll find the recordings the same way as you were accessing the paper one recording. So the same folder, just access it from there. We just discussed what your answer should have been for the questions you would have attended yesterday in paper one. Okay. But now our focus solely turns towards paper two. Of course, it's on the 12th, so we only have a few more days to go. Just to remind you that your P2 is still the larger component of your AS grade, so it's still 60%. And secondly, your paper two, the grade threshold tends to be lower as compared to paper one. Now, there's two ways to look at it. One way is that it's a more difficult exam, and that's why it's slower. So that's the glass half empty sort of approach. But if you are being a little bit, obviously, you want to feel a little bit more encouraged and you feel that you can do better in it, then it is a lower grade threshold, which means that you only have to get a few things right to be able to get a decent grade. And when you get a decent grade in your paper two, since the weightage is 60% of your overall grade, obviously any mistakes you might have made in paper one, you can cover it up by doing well in your paper two. Okay. Of course, paper two is completely different from the way you're given information in the paper as compared to paper one. You're given two case studies. You know that by now. Each case study will have four parts with it. There'll be sub parts within it as well, and they will test you across pretty much every type of question you can. So calculations, definition, analysis questions, evaluation questions. And one thing that's certain to happen in your paper two is that you're going to be tested on all 5 units equally. So what that means is that since there are two case studies, you will notice, and when you're attempting some past paper questions at home, notice that if you look at any one particular year, any one variant, so let's say 2024 June paper 2-1, you will notice that in the first case study, any 2 or 3 of the 5 units will be represented, in the sense that the information will be, let's say, from HR, operations, and finance. And the questions will also test you on these 3 units. And then as soon as you turn over to the second case study in the paper, you will see that the other two units, which would be, let's say, business and its environment and marketing in our example, those will be represented in the case study and the questions will be about them. So you have to make sure that you are going through everything in your syllabus. Don't assume that since yesterday you got a question on budgets, for example, right? So if anybody is thinking that, oh, finance has been tested and there's no way finance, you can get a large or 8 or 12 mark question on finance, but that's the wrong assumption to make. So prepare for everything. The way your approach changes from paper one to paper two is, of course, now you are focused on the information that's given about a business in the case study. So assumptions are gone. There are no ifs and buts and what ifs, and making all those stories about, well, this can also happen, and that might happen. If you are going to use anything as a business context, which is usually obviously our application, it must be taken from the business. So what I recommend to everyone, and I keep repeating this because it helps me process my answers better, is that approach the case study as a consultant to the business, and the business has come to you to find solutions for every type of problem, right? So they have financial problems, they will have obviously marketing, HR, etc., etc. So all of those problems are obviously represented in the case study, and you're being asked to give your solutions on what the business should do. So it's always a one-to-one conversation between you and the business. And whenever there's a one-to-one conversation, your replies are always to the person who's obviously talking to you, right? So right now I'm talking to you. If I ask you a question, reply to me, and you reply the things that I want to hear rather than things that are not concerned with me. So make sure that you're answering for the business, your applications coming from the case study. Of course, you can use your own concepts, your own understanding and knowledge to add to what they're asking, and that's required in an evaluation question, to give your own feedback, make decisions, the things like that. But On the basis of it, you should remain within the case study, and any problem you're being tested on, make sure the business context comes from the case itself. Okay, so that's just the way the approach changes. Uh, the manner of writing answers is the same, right? Your 8 markers are still 2 marks for knowledge, two for application, four for analysis. You divide it into 2 paragraphs, you make chunks of it, and you close it off. 12 markers still the same: two for knowledge, two for application, two for analysis, and six for evaluation. So obviously, you spend a little bit more time on giving decisions, looking at the external environment. Are there any constraints? Can you say something in support? Is there a recommendation to be made? All the things you would have done for a 12 marker in paper one would be the same for paper two. Just the difference being that application is locked in, which means whatever you see in the case study, that forms the basis of any problem you want to discuss, or even any solution you want to discuss, or anything you want to support, anything you want to appreciate about the business, or anything you want to criticize about the business. The action taken by the business should come from the case study. So don't make your own assumptions. And we know once you have the right application, you know what's changing in the business, and using your own knowledge, then you can analyze it properly. And analysis is the easy part, right? The advantages, the disadvantages. I'm sure you've gone through your syllabus 100, 1,000 times perhaps. And one thing that you always focus on is remembering the advantages and disadvantages, because that's the analysis bit, right? So it's going to help you in your 8 marker, going to help you in your 12 marker, your evaluation. Remember 4 words that are always sort of like a checklist to go through, that these are the things you should be thinking about in evaluation. Is first of all a decision. So whatever the question is asked, yes or a no, that's something you have to give. If it's a no, then give a recommendation. If it's a yes, then say something in support. Then why do you think this was good? Obviously, support it. Then there's a discussion of the external environment, and if any other constraints that are either coming in from the external environment or other departments of the business, that also forms part of your evaluation. So it's a real mix of it. And we've been learning, obviously, we'll go again and look at a few questions today and solidify that a little bit more. Okay, are there any questions so far? Anything that you guys are thinking of and maybe want to ask me before I go into the case study and show you how to process it? I guess silence is gold, and we'll move on. Okay, so this is the paper I've picked for today. One of the recent ones, obviously 2024 being last year, June, paper 23. And I'm looking at the second case study from this paper, which is called festival wear. So what you're expected to see in any case study presented is information in the form of words, information in the form of tables, maybe bullet points, and that's what we see here. So nothing out of the ordinary. And it'll be followed by 4 questions, parts A, B, C, and D, as you can see. So I think what I'm going to pick for today, a question B, obviously you want to look at the calculations, that still seems too troublesome. And I'm going to look at part C. Okay, or part D. What would you guys want to do? Would you want me to do a part C, which is about external sources of finance, or part D, which is about expanding product portfolio? Do we have a vote? Do we have a preference? C. Okay, we have 2 votes for C. I guess C takes the biscuit. So we'll go with C. Thank you, Mirjan and Imsha. So B and C are what we're going to attempt. B being a calculation question always. So B will have 2 parts. The first part will be a calculation, and the second part will be a 3 mark explain question about something related to that calculation. I have a comment here. Uh, look, the best way, I know a lot of you, and I think the question I've been asked is a question that a lot of you are thinking right now, that if let's say you got a 25, you're expecting in your paper one that it maybe didn't go so well. Okay, then you're thinking maybe 25, 26 is what you might get out of it. Right now, if you're thinking 25 out of 40 is what you're going to get, that means you've already lost 15 marks, right? Now, from another 60, a lot of you might be thinking, what do I need to score in paper two to make sure that, maybe when I'm languishing right now between a C or a D, can I bring that up to a B? So how many marks do I need to score? The best way to look at it and I'll show it, and I'll do it for you right now. How you approach it is to always look at the latest years where grade threshold. So I'm going to go to 2024 November, and I'm going to look at the grade thresholds. Okay, you guys can do this on your own at any time. Okay, maybe you want to do it right now with me. So what you look at is where did it go? AY, where is it? AY. Sorry, I'm looking for something specifically. Yeah, so these are your grade thresholds, right? So you guys appear for, most of you at least, I know, appear for the second variant. So if you look at component 1, 2, which is the second from the top, um, you know that paper 1 was out of 40, and let's say you are expecting a 25, right? So that's right between C and D. So C was at 26, D was at 24. So you're 25, you're at, you can call it C minus, or you can call it D plus. You're sort of in the middle, right? Now, if you want to improve your grade and you, let's say you do well in paper 2 and you think, oh, I've gotten a 40 out of it, right? Look at, and I'll read it for you, component 2022, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth in the list, component 22. Out of 60, if you're, let's say, getting 44, right? So that's a B. So 44 plus 26, right? That makes 60 and 70, right? 70% is usually not good enough for an A, but it's good enough for a B. Okay, anything 75 and above guarantees you an A. Maybe in some years, depending on the grade threshold, 73 out of 100 is what you might be able to get an A for. But if you're getting anywhere close to 70, right? So if 70 is your benchmark, if you think that if my paper 1 went bad and it was a D and I'm happy with the B, then you know you need to be scoring at least 70, right? To be sure of it. And that means that in your paper 2, you will need to score at least 44 out of the 60 marks that are on offer. So you can sort of do this calculation for yourselves. Maybe some of you are the paper went well and expecting something well, and let's say you score a 32 out of 14 paper 1, right? So 32, if you look at the second row in our list, component 1, 2, 32 puts you right in between the A and B range. So if you have that, then you know that if you want to go to an A or A star level, you will need at least 80 to 85, right? So if you're already at 32, 80 minus 32 is 52. So that's the number you're looking at. If you want to maintain your A, then you know you'll have to get on, let's say, 45. So you can set yourself targets, but obviously you're hoping that each question you do the best possible job you want to, you're able to answer it completely. So approach it like you're going to get everything right, but in this way you can sort of assess how your paper 1 went and you know what you want to be getting in your paper 2. I hope that sort of helps some of you. Right. So let's get back to the case study. Again, if you have any questions, just keep typing them up in the chat window and I'll be happy to answer them. Now, in any case study, before even you start reading it, there are 4 things that I always emphasize that you make a note of it, write it somewhere, highlight it, because it just helps you to gain a better understanding of the case. And that's always first, the structure the business has, so public, private, or sole trader, partnership, all of those things. The product that they're offering, whether they are a B2B or a B2C business, so that's distribution channels. And lastly, the objective. Okay. Any advice that you give to a business in your evaluation should be in line with the objective. Or if you spot in the business that they're making a decision that's going against their objective, then you highlight it and stop them from doing it in evaluation. So objectives are a very good way to evaluate, where the business is heading in the future. Okay. The way to do the way to attempt your case study is I always recommend first read the questions. so you know what are the major chunks in the case study that you definitely make a note of, and then start attempting it. And you always attempt it in the sequence that the questions are presented in, because your A and B collectively are 3 and 1 4, 4 and 6 10 marks. Those are easy 10 marks to gain across four small questions. And attempting a 12 mark straight away is not even possible, because you need to have read the entire case study, gone through each part, done the calculation, answered everything, and then you will have enough understanding of the case study to fully answer for a 12 mark, right? Especially if you look at the way that the question paper is designed, it slowly unlocks different parts of the case study for you. They'll ask for a definition, they'll ask for an explanation, a little calculation here, an application part here, an analysis there. So line by line and paragraph by paragraph, you'll see that you are slowly unlocking the knowledge of what's contained in the case. And by the time you are there to attempt the 12 marker, you have a full understanding of what the business is, and then you can do a proper evaluation. So I do not recommend attempting a 12 marker first and then 8 marker just because they contain more marks. You won't be able to do a good job with your answers because you won't have the understanding. Just reading the case once and thinking you're ready to 12 answer a 12 mark answer is not possible. Okay, so the questions that we are attempting today, as Imsha and Mirjan had voted, we're going to look at first the calculation where we have to calculate FW's break even output per month if the new payment method is introduced. So something will be changing, due to which we have to see when does the company break even. Then B part 2 is explain one advantage to FW's employees of the new payment method. And then we'll go to part C, which is analyze two external sources of finance. So in an 8 marker, always highlight the main knowledge point. What are you being tested on? And clearly here, it's sources of finance, but particularly external sources of finance. So sale of assets, reducing your expenses, looking into your retained profits if you have any, those options are off the table. Anything that's coming from outside the business, only those sources should be mentioned as advice. Okay, so external source of finance that FW could use to invest in new machinery. Now, always remember that to buy a piece of machinery, the best external source of finance, the most immediate source that you think of, is leasing or hire purchase, right? So you go to a bank and you ask them to buy the machine for you. They give it to you, and then the transfer of ownership comes later, and you pay in installments, etc., etc. So that's always immediately your answer should be that first you can go for leasing, right? If you can't do that, then you explore other scenarios. Externally, you can sell shares, you can look for a venture capitalist, you can do crowdfunding, uh, you can also issue debentures if you're a big enough company. So there are plenty of external sources of finance. But when it comes to machinery, because you will need to update it again, and that's why you try to have a lease deal with the bank for as long as the useful life of the company of the machine is. So that once the machine is fully used, then you pay it off, and then you get another upgrade through the help of the bank again. So one source will definitely be always leasing or hire purchase when you're looking to buy a machine, right? Or any asset that's going to be used in the business other than land. If there's a question of land, then what you immediately recommend is mortgage, right? Mortgages are specifically for land. You can't use mortgage for machinery, but if you have to buy land, then you go for mortgages. Okay, so those are just little signs to know what are the examiners looking for when they ask such a question. Right. I hope we're okay. Again, if there's anything you want to ask me, just type it up. I'll go into the case study now and start exploring it. Now, obviously, you'll have 45 minutes to do one case study. And I understand that sometimes it takes longer to go to the first case study because you want to do it right. You're still, the first 5 minutes, you're still settling into your paper. It takes a while to get your blood pumping. So it may be a little bit longer to finish. It may take a little bit longer to finish first case study, but don't be alarmed, right? Because just make sure that even if by the end of your case, if of your exam, your 12 marker, you're rushing through it and half of it is done, at least you've done the easy bits right. You've gone through most of the case study. And 12 markers, if you're only having trouble with the last 12 marker, there's enough provision that even if you do half of your 12 mark right and you get 6 marks out of it, but if you do the rest of your paper well, then you're definitely on for an A grade because you need 45. 45 is a good target out of 60 for an A. Even if you lose 6 marks, there's still 9 marks of margin of error that you can make. And if you're spending the right amount of time that is needed for each part in the first two case studies, then you'll be okay. So don't worry about that. So what I was explaining was that mortgage and lease are both sort of an external source of finance where the bank offers you money, but mortgages are particularly given to buy land. Okay, so if a company wants to buy land, then you go to a bank and ask for a mortgage, and there the security is the land itself. If you want to buy a machinery, if you want to buy any equipment or tools that laptops and computers, then you go to a bank and they offer you leasing. So it depends on what your asset is. If it's land, then the banks offer you mortgage. If it's machinery or any other equipment, the banks will offer you leasing. So it's just how they're used. That's the difference. Okay. um Yes, Alian, absolutely. So you can change your structures. You can always recommend a change of structure to from a private to a public or from a partnership to a private, and that way you open up another new source of finance. Obviously, you will have to look at what the business is about. If let's say we'll read in this case study that if they don't want to become a limited company, then that option is off the table. For example, if some case studies say that the business wants to remain independent, which means they don't want boards, they don't want shareholders. So in that case, you may not be able to recommend that. But if there's no restriction like that in the case study, then you can go ahead and say that you can become a private limited company and start selling shares. Okay. So let's get into it. Let's see what FW has, right? So FW is a partnership. Here we already know what kind of structure they have. I'll make a note of it. Started by two friends, Mars and Jane. FW manufactures and sells high quality t-shirts at $40 each. So we already know their product as well. They sell high quality t-shirts. The business can manufacture 35,000 t-shirts per month using mass customization. The t-shirts are only sold at music festivals and concerts and are customized to each event. So kind of an idea of what the distribution channel they're using. They are sold at music festivals and concerts. So obviously, they're selling directly to consumers, those who are attending these concerts. FW has never advertised the t-shirts, relying on a sales team to attend a festival or concert and personally sell the t-shirts. So they are more direct selling. Remember, if you remember your marketing chapter, there's a part about direct selling where you train your people, your salespeople, and you send them out to sell directly. This is how they're doing it. Okay. Now, the current cost, variable cost, and remember, variable cost is always part of your break-even discussion. So maybe this is useful for us because we are attempting a break-even question later. So current costs say that your variable costs right now are $10 per shirt. And I'm just going to make a note of it. Variable cost is $10 per shirt, and the fixed cost is $200,000. So we know that right now, even if we tried, we could very easily calculate break even for this. Right, so we know our break even is fixed cost upon contribution. We know contribution to be selling price minus variable cost, right? Even though the question's asking us about the new price, I just want to show you this as an example. Okay. We already know that the price is $40, right? We have our variable cost here. So this becomes 40 minus 10. So my contribution is 30. All right, and we know that this goes straight into the denominator here. We already have our fixed cost given here as 200,000. So my break-even formula then becomes 200,000 divided by 30, right? And whatever that number is, um, let me just look at my calculator. 66,666. I think that's what it's going to be. $200,000 divided by 3666 is 6,667 units are what they're going to have to produce in order to break even at the current cost. Okay. Now remember the question asked for the new payment method. That hasn't come up. So this is just an example. I don't want you to think that this is the answer for B part one. Okay. So let's move on. What we know about the business is they're a partnership. They sell high quality t-shirts at $40. They sell directly. So that's B2C. And we know their cost structure and how much they need to sell in order to break even. Now sales average 27,000 t-shirts per month. Currently, the sales team is paid a monthly salary, but Mars is proposing a new payment method in order to increase sales volume. So this is, I guess, part of our discussion in the calculation. So I'm going to make a note of it that there's a new payment method being proposed, and that is that this will mean a lower monthly salary, but a commission of $2 per shirt will be paid. So this is the change: lower monthly salary, but every t-shirt they sell, they're going to make $2 on it. And it will make sense. Remember, for all your sales teams, logically, we've seen this from an HR perspective that if you're given a fixed salary, it doesn't necessarily lead to more sales, right? If your sales team is getting the money that they're always going to get, then they're not going to make the effort to go and find new customers. But in order to encourage them to be more on their feet and go out and get more sales, you assign them a commission. And rightly so, Mars is proposing that they should be a $2 commission per t-shirt. Then Mars estimates that sales volume would increase to 30,000 per month. So obviously, when you feel more encouraged as a salesperson, they're expecting that they'll be able to sell more. Okay. Now, the cost if the new payment method is introduced will be variable cost $12. Obviously, $10 is the cost of making it, then another $2 of commission on it, and this would be their fixed cost. Now, can anyone tell me why this fixed cost has gone down? Any idea? What do we know about the business so far? What have they done that might lead to a reduction in their fixed cost? No, so Emma's fixed cost doesn't have anything to do with price, right? We're looking at the cost side, not the revenue side right now. So, yeah, very good. They discussed that there'll be a lower monthly salary paid. And that's why perhaps they saved about $18,000. That's what it's saying. Yeah, $18,000 by giving them a lower monthly salary. So, you sort of keep adding the little components of the case study so you gain a better understanding. And now at this point, we can actually attempt our first question, which was my calculation question. It is right here, right? This is what the calculation question is saying, that calculate FW's break-even output per month if the new payment method is introduced, right? So again, if you get a question on break-even, you do it the same way every time. It is fixed cost upon contribution. Our contribution is selling price minus variable cost. Okay. Now there is no talk of an increase in price. The price is still $40, right? They're just paying $2 more commission per t-shirt, which basically brought our variable cost up to 12, right? So 40 minus 12 means that from each t-shirt you'll be able to make $28 worth of contribution per unit. Remember, contribution is always per unit. And then this number goes into the denominator here. And when I solve for my break even, this becomes my fixed cost was 182,000. Remember the new reduced amount divided by 28. Right? And this would give us 182,000 divided by 28. This tells us that if they're able to sell 6,500 t-shirts, and by the way, the examiner reports say that just the number is fine. You don't have to give the unit, but if you did, these would be t-shirts. 6,500 t-shirts is what they'll have to sell now to break even at the new payment method that has been offered. Everybody okay? Is there anything about this calculation that you didn't understand? always remember your calculations. It's not really math, right? They're just testing your knowledge and your ability to remember a formula. So as soon as you see the question, write down the formula straight away on the paper, so you know that these are the things that you need to be looking for. And once I had this formula, and I was thinking that, okay, I've got fixed cost, and in order to calculate contribution, and I know the formula, I know this the selling price, and I know the variable cost. Remember, all the components are given to you. It's just about knowing the concept and putting it in again. So it's always selling price minus variable cost to calculate your contribution, which is 40 minus 12. The new variable cost was 12. We saw in the case study, your price did not change. 40 minus 12 means $28 is what you're going to make as contribution per unit. That goes into your denominator. Your numerator was given as 182,000, and that's simply what I did here. If you use the selling price of a cost and not so are you saying that you do it here? You mention it here? Okay, it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing, but it's just this way you know that you're not skipping anything. And if you somehow get this part wrong because of calculations, you know that you get graded for this one at least. So my recommendation always is that show the full working. First, write the full formula, show this, and this is the best way to attempt break even. This leaves no margin for error. Okay? Right. So this was B part one. Yeah, I hope everybody's clear. And B will always have a second part. And this isn't it. Where did it go? What was the question? Explain one advantage. This is not an 8 marker. Sorry, I'll just correct this. Give me a moment. This is a 3 marker. Okay. So B part 2 is explain one advantage to FW's employees of the new payment method, right? So very clearly the question is not asking you to show how the business benefits, right? Read the question very carefully. They want you to talk about the advantage to the employees, okay? And of doing what? Of the new payment method. And we know that this new payment method is a $2 commission per t-shirt, right? So when you have to explain, remember this is a 3 marker, then you have to take the same sequence in the sense that you'll have 1 mark for knowledge and you'll have to show 2 marks of application, right? This is the sequence of your answer. And the first part of knowledge will obviously be the fact about what's the benefit. What is it that the employees are going to get when the more commission is made? They're given commission per t-shirt. And the advantage is obviously that they will end up with a higher monthly income. Okay. Now, obviously, when you mention this, it takes care of knowledge, but then you have to explain how that's happening in FW. How will they be implementing this process of commission? So I do that by saying that with a higher sales expected, and use as many numbers from the case study as possible. And here we know that they have predicted that with the sales numbers, they'll be able to increase the sales volume to 30,000 per month. 30,000 is what they're going to sell. So as you're expecting, the sales are going expected to increase to 30,000 t-shirts, right? Then you bring in the punchline that your sales agent or salespeople, whatever you want to call it, can earn on each unit sold, and this will directly improve their, you can call it disposable income, take home income. Those are both terms that you can use. Okay. And that's it. Just three layers, simply explaining how is it that the employees benefit? Well, they make more money, and this is how they're going to do it. Because if they're going to sell more, then they expect to be paid more. And if they are paid more, they will have more income. Okay, nothing too fancy, just simply straight sequence of what will happen and how will this impact them. Does this mean we can, or does this also mean we can identify the inefficient employees and this? No, so look, this questions is simply asking you how does this change in payment method benefit an employee. Okay, if you're thinking about finding inefficiencies and dismissing them, that's not an advantage, that's a disadvantage. So don't think about disadvantages when the questions very clearly asking you about the advantages of doing it. Okay. All right, shall we move on? Yeah, just want to remind you what the next question is about. This is the 8 marker that we'll be looking at today. So, um, as we always do with an 8 marker, why don't you help me out and tell me, if you read this question, which word in there tells you that that's the knowledge that's being tested? Remember, we divided into knowledge, application, analysis. That's the key to it all, guys. What are you being tested on? What is this question testing you on? Which Okay, very good. So, someone spoken and spoken wisely, sources of finance, and very particularly external source of finance. Very good, Imsha. So, knowledge, meaning that I only have to think about the external source of finance. The moment you mention retained profit, you are going to get 0 marks for it. The moment you mention selling your own assets, 0 marks for it. So the moment you highlight that this is what I need to focus on in your mind, you know that that's sort of my boundary. I can only think of the external sources, which 9 we've discussed in our syllabus. That's the only applicable in this question. Okay, so what's application? What situation in the business do they want us to focus on? Do they want us to buy land? Clearly not. Very good. So they want us to find a way to invest in new machinery. All right. So only that situation is what you can use to recommend. If it's something about expanding into international markets and they're looking to spend some research money, that's not going to be part of your answer. If there's a discussion of they want to change the legal structure, and in that case, board has to be given some things, not part of it. All you're focusing on is there's a machinery that has to be bought, and with the machine, what external sources business can use, and how many do you have to discuss? Clearly, there are two, and they could use. So this is what you need to analyze. Two external sources that they could use to invest in the new machinery. Okay. And like I said, your number one response in this situation is always leasing. All right. Externally, you can also change structure and obviously become a limited company, and that's also possible. There's also a chance of getting venture capitalists. You can also go for not outsourcing, crowdfunding. Um, you could also issue debentures if you think about it. Remember, you buying a machine. Can we think of So let me rephrase this question. When you look at your external source of finance, we divide them into 3 categories, right? Short term, medium term, long term. Which of these three can you, which of these three should not be mentioned as an option? Let's put it that way. Short term, medium term, long one. Which ones don't apply to buying a new machine? Could you use a trade credit, for example, to buy new machinery? Think about it. Would you buy a machine by taking a bank overdraft, which is small amount of money? Could you buy a machine from small amounts of money taken from a bank, especially when you have to pay a higher interest on it? I think it would not be wise, right? Trade credit is something else we learned about in the short term source of finance. And remember, trade credit is offered by your suppliers. Your suppliers don't give you machinery, they give you raw materials. So clearly, trade credit cannot be used either. Right? So, what I'm hinting at is that your short term sources of finance are only used for liquidity management when you have small cash flow problems. And therefore, even though they're part of your external source of finance, we know that mentioning any short term source of finance will not be right because they are not used to buy big machines. So, what you do is you eliminated internal sources of finance anyways because the question didn't ask for it. And you can further eliminate your short term source of finance because they're only used to meet your short term needs. And that leaves you with three categories, right? Like you've got your medium term, long term, and your other sources. So in medium term, we straight away discussed leasing, hire purchase, right? So leasing slash hire purchase, that's definitely top of the list. Then you go into your long term sources. Well, we can become a limited company, we can sell debentures. And then you look at your other source of finance, of which we've discussed four, right? One is a government grant, other one is venture capitalist, then there was crowdfunding, and then the last one was which one was that? Uh, Grants, venture capitalists, crowdfunding. There was one more. What am I missing? What's the last other source of finance we've discussed? Crowdfunding, venture capitalist. There was one more. What am I forgetting? Wow. Uh, no, no, it wasn't debenture. Debenture was part of your long-term sources. There were four other grants, venture capitalist, crowdfunding, microfinance banks, right? Microfinance banks. Microfinance banks are there for new and struggling businesses. Right now, from what we see about this business, it is not struggling. In fact, they are planning to sell more t-shirts next year. So microfinance banks will not offer them any solution. So, in a way, you sort of start eliminating what doesn't apply, which will leave you with what the things that do apply. And I can think of these five here, that any two of these five are valid options for you to talk about. So I'm going to definitely talk about leasing, and let's talk about change of structure, becoming a private limited company and then selling its shares. So they're both viable options, right? You could also talk about venture capitalists, somebody who wants to bring in money with a share in the company. That's up to you. Okay. So remember that in 8 marker, you still have to attempt knowledge for 2 marks, application for 2, and analysis for 4. And what we do is that we convert it into a formula, right? So what you got to do is each paragraph should have enough to get you 1 point for knowledge, 1 for application, 2 for analysis. As long as you do this twice, because they've asked you for 2 points, you will be okay. Right? Now in this one, a definition isn't needed. Obviously, you can't define source of finance. You can't define external source of finance because it's composed of many other things. But what you can define is the actual source that you talk about. So when I talk about leasing, I'll discuss that and obviously start with its definition, then explain how it can be used and how business will have to pay, etc., etc. And then I'll talk about a change of structure. Okay. So let me just take you back to the case study for a minute and remind you of what we know, that right now they are a partnership between Mars and Jane. Right? They're looking to expand, they sell t-shirts and they're looking to sell 30,000 next month. And this is where they decided that they're also going to change the salary structure uh, of the sales team. Right? Now there hasn't been a discussion of a new machinery yet. So let's keep reading and see where they would mention it. Where is it? Is it here? Okay, it's here. So this proposal of an increase of this commission, this proposal has been discussed with the sales team. Some members of the team are enthusiastic about the proposal, but others are not happy with what they see as a reduction in their pay. That's natural, of course. Those who are good workers will see this as a good opportunity. The business is expanding and considering moving to a bigger factory. So this is the main idea behind it, that they want to move to a big factory because they are expanding. And this would require a $4 million investment. Now, immediately, if you remember from our discussions in our about our syllabus, whenever there's an amount in millions, right, that's you immediately eliminate your short-term sources straight away because there's not enough money. Medium term, you can still get that funded through leasing, but you'll never get a medium term loan for it. If you want to get millions of dollars, then you have to think about your long term and your other source of finance. Okay. So they want to get $4 million invested in new machinery and staff training. So obviously, we are more concerned with the machinery bit because that's what the question's asking. And they need $4 million to get it into the factory. Then Jane would also like to consider methods to increase sales volume. She has suggested that FW should expand its product portfolio to manufacture other items such as baseball caps. Okay, so again, we're not attending. This is something that would be needed for the 12 marker. The 8 marker that we're looking at has to do with the new machine of $4 million and us coming up with the two correct sources, the external source of finance for the business. So if I'm answering this question here, the way I would do it is I would actually in paper 2 start with the application. Okay, you can't in this way. I can't explain source of finance. They are individually there to be explained, but not as a concept. So I'll explain here that since they are looking to expand or looking to grow, however you want to explain it, this requires a bigger machinery. And for that, we will explore two external sources. Yeah. And if you want, you can mention the two sources that you're going to talk about in your uh, answer later on, such as leasing and change of structure. Okay, so it's important to lay the background sort of in application, what you're going to talk about, show to the examiner that, you're on to the right track. And then you start with bit of knowledge in your paragraph by mentioning the source of finance. That one source they could use is leasing. Whoa, something wrong with the pencil. Leasing, which is a pay as you use structure, pay as you use method to invest in new machinery. Okay, so very clearly mentioning. Right now, why and how they will use it, that's where you will bring in your application that they need a $4 million investment. Remember, numbers are important. Always use numbers wherever you can. Investment in machines, and the business can approach banks to acquire the investment needed. Okay. Now, the analysis, remember, is always the benefit to the business. Right? That's what they're asking. What should FW use? Okay, not how the banks benefit. So here, why FW is doing this is that they can pay over the useful life of machine in installments, in periods, however you want to mention it. Right? One, that's the advantage. What this leads to is that it helps you to It helps you to manage, or helps FW to manage cash flows or cash outflow better. Plus, you have a lower initial investment. Remember, you have to put down some amount as token. Remember, that's 25 or 30%. So that says 4 million. Then FW would still have to put down a quarter, which is 1 million, and the other 3 million will be put up by the bank, and then the bank will go ahead and buy it for you. So they can manage this, and you get immediate uh, ability to produce. And this would, and again, look how I'm including other parts of the case study to make my answer better. And once you have this machinery that you can, then you can meet 30,000 production or sales target for next year. Remember, they mentioned that in the case study that they're looking to sell more and they're expecting 30,000 shares to be sold. And this will help them to achieve that. Okay. So I've kept it financial, the analysis, but also any non-financial. So financial is that I can control my outflows a little bit better. I don't have to make all the initial investment at once. And then the non-financial is that I can go into production straight away and actually meet the 30,000 targets that I want to make. So this, if you look at this part, this forms one point here, right? From here to here. Remember, you have to make two. This is number one. This is equals to 4 marks. You'll have to do another one for the second source of finance that you want to recommend. And I think I mean, if you want me to do another one, but I think a change of structure is an obvious answer here. Um, so I'll mention that here, that the other thing that you can do is change structure. And you can then, as a private limited company, sell shares to raise money. Okay. Now, since we are talking about a change of structure, yes, we'll talk about the amount of money we need. But whenever there's a change of structure, when you become a limited company, then the people who are impacted the most are the original owners. Remember, this is a partnership between Mars and Jane. And so they have to be a discussion of application. Wherever you discuss a change of structure, you will have to discuss how it impacts or what say the current owners of the business will have, which are the two partners, Mars and Jane. So yes, they need $4 million, right? And they can obviously look to investors, friends and family. Remember, private limited companies can do that. Friends and family to provide investment. But another level of application here would be that it also depends on how this will change the uh, ownership and therefore decision making of Mars and Jane. Okay, so again, I'm using content from the case study to give it more context. This is what's happening. If you change structure, these are the people who will be impacted, but the benefit that you will get out of it, remember, is your analysis. And what you can mention here is that because of change of structure, you can continue selling shares, right? And you can raise the $4 million. At the same time, you can Mars and Jane, right? Mars and Jane can retain the controlling stake, which is 51% more in FW, right? Again, just mention that this would be Mars and Jane. And by doing that, they can control the future of the business. So, what I can mention is they can control how to expand product portfolio. Again, remember we when we reading the case study, we saw that this is part of their future plan. So I'm bringing that in here. You really have to fill up your answer with application. Any evidence that you can use from the case study, bring it in your answer. Let me give them some more space. And what else? What I want to say? They can sell shares. They can keep it between friends and family. Um, and does not have to be repaid. Remember, it would be an investment. The investor takes the risk of it. And that will then form the second point. Anything less, you're taking chances. This is the bare minimum. I always mention this. Any point is as easy as one, two, three. This is the bare minimum. One line for knowledge, two for application, at least three for analysis. If you're doing that, then you're at least meeting the examiner where they want to see you. The rest of it depends on how well your answer was, if you talked about the right things, if you've obviously mentioned any internal source of finance, you won't be graded for that. But on the at least on the minimum side, this is what you will need to do to make sure that you have a good answer. All right, so these are all the questions we did today. How are we doing? Um, Again, costly how? In the sense of the paperwork and stuff that you have to do. Yeah, you can bring it in the end in analysis. That's fine, but make sure you're focusing on the advantages and disadvantages equally. Don't just go on one side. Okay. All right. Good. 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 So, anybody else? Anything about this or anything else about paper two that you are maybe wondering about and might want to ask me? I'll give you a minute to think about it and then ask me. Are you nervous? I honestly feel paper two is maybe it's just me. I find it easier than paper one. Always is more exciting because it's like a jigsaw. Everything's in front of you. Put it together. You use a bit of your common sense and your knowledge of business, and you'll be fine. So if I were you, I'd be more upbeat about paper two. Um, Again, 45 is a realistic target to achieve in paper two. As long as you've done all the latest past papers, 23 and 24, we've done majority of them here in class. If you've done then you should be okay. Yeah, so a couple of things, right? There will be more classes from now till the exam day. I will have class every day. So yes, and the time is yes less, but again, I want you to understand that if you are struggling to finish the last 12 marker towards the end, and even if you've done half of it right, then you're okay. If you spend the right amount of time in the first case, let's say you take 55 minutes for the first case study, you have 35 less for the next one, and in those 35, you manage to do part A, part B, and part C, and a bit of part D. And that's also fine. It's more important to do majority of the paper correctly than doing all of it and rushing through it. Okay, so you may feel that you will, even if you go by the time, you will always feel that you could have done more in the last 12 marker because that's just how you know we as humans process it. But just give yourself 50 minutes for the first case study. That's realistic. Anything less, you're fooling yourself. So 50 is a good number of amount of time for you to finish it. And then whatever you can manage in the last 12 marker, be smart. Obviously, if you're rushing through the last 12 mark question in the second case study, Mention more things that are related to evaluation, because that's 6 marks to give your judgment, recommendations, and things. Because if you have less time, you want to focus on those things which will get you more marks. So that's one way to do it. Okay. Anything else? All right, then let's call it a day. So I'll be here tomorrow again, same time, same place, same link. See you guys here tomorrow. If you have any questions that I'm sure you'll be studying tonight and that come up, just jot them down so you can share it and bring them in class tomorrow and I'll answer them. All right. Thank you for being here again. Take care. Good luck with all your exams. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye. Allah Hafiz.